Welcome, guys, to another episode of Tuesday Talks. We're your hosts, Dan and Harris.
What's going on, Harris? How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, man. What's going on with you?
Yeah, it's pretty good. We've got a new addition to the family, another kitten. It's a wild time at home, but it's also a wild time across Canada with everything going on. If you've seen lately, and I think a lot of our folks that are probably tuning in too, you may have seen on the news, whether you're here or south of the border, that we've got some issues with an Emergency Orders Act that the Prime Minister has put into place. You want to talk me through this, Harris? What can I expect?
I mean, you know what was I think was it the Ottawa's interim police chief or something who said that their constable or whoever is in charge said that he's like warning everybody that they're gonna to expect the police to behave in a way they haven't behaved before. Um, I would say
That sounds like a threat.
it is. I mean, yeah, doesn't sound like one. It is.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but I would say that I don't know. Like I started off thinking, um, like what the government did was. I just feel like it's just very unprofessional. And the more time goes by, the more time or the more I feel that like this is just not something that we should be expecting a little bit more professionalism from our elected officials. Like the fact that I mean, for those of you who may be tuning outside from outside of Canada, we just had a kind of a group of people who started as like truckers who started objecting the mandates to get vaccinated, and it kind of gathered uh, quite a bit of momentum. And then they made their way to Ottawa, which is the capital, and then they also kind of blocked off a few borders um, between the U.S. and Canada. So I think when they got into Ottawa, our prime minister got COVID. He ran off.
It was quite convenient that well, first he said he was exposed to COVID,
Yeah.
but he tested negative, and then lo and behold, and the funny thing is, not to say I'm predicting the future, but in this case, I think I kind of did it because I put it out there on social media, and I said, you know what, I wouldn't be surprised if over the weekend he tests positive, so it buys him a little bit more time to, figure out a game plan and to stay into hiding. And I think that's what kind of irked people is all of these truckers and folks that are looking to maybe make a change as far as what's happened with the lockdowns. And I hear most of them are vaccinated, so I don't even know if it's a argument against vaccination. I think it's just an argument against mandates. But the fact way, and if you've been watching any of the clips on the House of Commons and what's going on there, it's kind of like a runaway train now, and people can't look away. A lot of the legacy media in the U.S. are picking it up and around the world too, because people are looking to see, okay, well, you know, um, how's this government dealing with their own people? Because I know Trudeau had come out when it first started saying it was a small fringe minority looking to disrupt things, and that's simply not the case. They're a group that are trying to get their point across. I think the interesting thing is I'd seen this on a tweet that was it maybe a couple of years ago, India was in a similar situation. And this had been going on for like over a year where the farmers were protesting conditions there in India. So they had blocked a lot of the major arteries into New Delhi. And Trudeau had stood up and with solidarity with the farmers and said, you have the right to protest, and Canada will back you on that. And then as soon as this happens, and I do remember like when I was living downtown Toronto, I would see a lot of farm equipment going down the Gardiner with flags from India on it and people
Mm-hmm.
honking and protesting. And, it did upset people here because obviously it was slowing things down and disrupting life. But Trudeau had stepped up and said, look, we support the peaceful protesting. Now that the protesting's kind of come to his backyard and it's domestic, he's kind of changed his tune, and there's There's no room for that here. So it's interesting because it's put a lot of people um, in two different camps. And, now with this Emergencies Act that he's put into place, it looks like they have the ability to um, freeze assets, freeze bank accounts, levy fines. They can force tow trucks to actually go ahead and tow these vehicles. Otherwise, they're going to, face fines. So I don't know. Like, I
Mm.
heard that some tow truck union or association had come out and said, "Look, we're not going to um, mandate or force our union members to do something when we don't know how we're going to be protected from backlash in this." So I think it's easier said than done what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of it is pressure from down south. I think like last week, Biden said something, and all of a sudden these measures started taking place. I think before Trudeau was like, if I close my eyes, it'll just go away. And then he opened it, and everybody was still right in front of him. So I think there's an element of that. And when Biden kind of kicks in and says, "Hey, listen, like this needs to be fixed," that message could have been sent through the U.S. embassy through an ambassador if it wasn't as extreme. And because Biden's kind of sending it, it means that the U.S. was concerned too. Because what if this
Right.
sparks protests in the U.S.? What I find,
Which I think it's going to.
I,
I think it's definitely going to.
I mean, what I find extremely interesting, just the narrative of everything what we hear in media. Like if you look at China, it's like, oh my God, people are protesting and they're an authoritarian regime and they just want to control like what you're thinking and doing, and oh my God. But over here it's kind of like if somebody objects, no, well, they're domestic terrorists and we have to like eliminate the threat or contain the threat. It's like what you're doing is not far from what they're doing. It's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. It's interesting how it's framed, right? And I don't know. It can be dangerous too. We'll see what happens. I mean, the interesting thing too is with this Emergencies Act. I think it's in place for 30 days. We have Bank of Canada announcement on the overnight lending rate, right? So the last one, I think they do eight a quarter or not eight a quarter, eight a year.
Yeah.
So eight announcements. The first announcement that came out, they kind of held interest rates, and a lot of folks were thinking that the next one they were going to go ahead because there were hints of them increasing that rate. Um, but I mean, if we're sort of in this, I don't know, it's not really a lockdown, but where we've enacted the emergency whatever act. I think there's going to likely not be a rate increase. That's just my prediction on it. I don't know, but if everything's sort of like in a holding pattern right now, that's what I think is going to happen. Is there's just going to be another wait and see till this wears off. Because look, as of right now, as of our filming, Ottawa is still being occupied.
Yeah.
The truckers haven't backed down.
Yeah.
How's this going to end? I know they've been assembling a lot of law enforcement, and if they have to push things forward in a way that it's never been, used before, it could get messy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think.
I don't think there's going to be a rate increase. I love the fact that the Bank of Canada makes it seem like it's their decision. I don't think it's their decision. It's um,
Let's talk about that. So whose decision? If it's not the Bank of Canada, who ultimately controls that?
I think
I think I know the
a
answer,
lot
but
of it is coordinated between the G7 countries, because the
mm,
way the interest rates fluctuate dictates how much money can be printed and put into the economy, and they also want to maintain some relationships in currencies. For example, Canada traditionally has been keeping its currency weak, so to kind of promote exporting to the states for whatever reason, right? I mean, we could have other markets, but we just want to export to the U.S. and all 80% of our exports go down to the states, and by keeping that currency weaker, um, what you have is you just have a thriving export market. But if you increase that rate, for example, and the U.S. doesn't, then you're going to have a stronger currency and it's going to decrease your exports. Argument is it also is going to stabilize housing. It could stabilize your buying power. You have stronger buying power, so you don't need as many Canadian dollars to go buy something else. So, and we can definitely find other people to buy our stuff. Maybe we need to diversify. So maybe if exports go down to in the States, maybe it'll go down from 80 to 70 to 60, and maybe we can make the shortfall by
Right.
diversifying, sending somewhere else. That's just kind of economic policy for me. If the U.S. increases their interest rate and we don't, then I mean the currency gap becomes insane, right? And so then things get very expensive for us. So they want to kind of bring it up together. I don't think, to be honest, right now, the U.S. is in any kind of position to increase interest rates. I don't think they will.
I'd seen an article where they had mentioned that there's possibly a 2% increase south of the border because of something to do with the bond yield, and to expect interest rates to be on the rise in the very near future. But I mean, I don't know. Like you said, it's possible that they don't increase it.
Yeah, I mean, everybody said that they were going to increase it on earlier this year, but they didn't. Goldman Sachs, JP
Right.
Morgan, they all predicted, oh yeah, 4 rate hikes, this and that. Or now now they're saying there's going to be a super rate hike. I think as soon as they started talking about rate hikes, the stock market started falling, and nobody, like, they just kind of backed away from everything. And so I don't think, and then now they're kind of going, oh yeah, no, we need, like, it's going to be super rate hike. It's going to be like 50 basis points. I mean, your inflation is coming in at 7.5. Right, you need to be at like 7.5.
Is that what the U.S. is right
Yeah,
now?
U.S. is above
Wow.
7%. This is state calculated. If you calculate it the same way the government did 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it would actually be 15%. But just the way they calculate it now changes over time. As soon as prices start
Uh,
going up, like for example, the way inflation is calculated is you have a basket of goods, CPI index, right? And you measure the value of those things and the prices of those things in that basket. So like egg, milk, this, that, whatever. And then like you see it one year, and the next year if it goes up, you're like, all right, this is the inflation. But what they're now doing is they are also using substitutes, right? So let's say
mm,
if year one you have steak. Steak is $8 a pound, whatever that is. I'm just making stuff up, but let's just
yeah,
say
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
number. I don't know the number for this, but yeah. And then next year, steak goes to $30 a pound or whatever it is, right? But they say, hey, wait, well, not a lot of people are getting steak anymore. They're getting chicken. Chicken is $4 a pound. So we'll replace the 8 with the 4, which shows that prices have gone down, but really they've gone up. But they're just claiming that, oh, well, no, people are not eating steak anymore. We got to kind of keep up with the trends. They're eating chicken. Well, they're eating chicken because they can't afford the steak.
Well, that's exactly it. Yeah, yeah. They still want their protein. They can't get the good stuff because they can't afford the good
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Um,
So,
so here's and it's interesting here because I think we talked about this. Inflation back in December was what was it 4.8%, and then the numbers just came out for last month, and we're what 5.1
yeah,
percent.
yeah, some of the
They said
highest.
it's the highest since 1991.
Yeah,
I mean that's pretty insane. Out west in Vancouver, I've heard that um, the price of gas is over $1.80 a liter. That's for 87 octane, like the low
yeah.
stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's the cost of living's just gone through the roof. It's astronomical. Where does it end, and what happens? Where do we go from here? I don't know.
I think they're not going to
Uh,
raise rates until they're forced to raise rates. At
right,
one point, they're going to have to tame inflation, and the only way to do that is
right.
to increase interest rates. And they're buying their time, because as soon as um, they raise interest rates, it's going to have ramifications across the economy. House prices are going to come down. I would love to see house prices come down. to be honest, right? Making
Yeah,
it
the
affordable.
average is what $836,000 across
Yeah,
Canada now. That's the average cost of a detached home. It's gone up something like 20% in the last month.
yeah,
It's insane.
yeah. See,
Or last year, year over year. Yeah, so it's like it's not sustainable. So what's this thing called hyperinflation?
hyperinflation is this is it. Well, I mean, like hyperinflation, normal.
Are we there yet? What's the threshold for determining we're in a state of hyperinflation?
Let's see. Let me just Google this real quick. That's the
Because I feel like we're 4 or 5%, um, and we're upward trending at this point. At what point do we say, okay, we've hit hyperinflation?
so inflation that's greater than 50%. So
All
that's
right,
when that's
we still
hyperinflation.
got a little ways to go on that, but still, I mean, if we kind of project this out, we don't do something to change how we're dealing with the inflation. It just,
Dude,
I mean,
but 50% means like the sky is falling, literally.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
So, I mean, parts of the sky could start falling at 10%, 5%, right? It's not like our salaries have gone up. I remember, like, I think there's a stat, I think somewhere between 800% to 1,000% is the increase in prices of housing from 2008 in the GTA from to now. Like they're saying 800% or something like that, 8 times, right?
that's insane.
So
That's insanity.
how has our like even if it's not, I remember what the first house my parents got 20 years ago, 30 years ago, three 400,000. Now it's like 1.5 approaching 2 million, right?
Yeah,
That's what
yeah,
five
and that's
x.
the thing. Like, yeah, and wages aren't increasing at that rate. If you're in the same job, same position, I mean, you have a cost of living adjustment,
Yeah.
and maybe annually, but it's just not sustainable. I pulled up here some information on provincially what our inflation rate has been, um, and the change is from the previous month. So highest comes in at PEI at 7.1%.
Oh, well.
Last month there was 6.7%. Ontario's 5.7%, up from 5.2%. Looks like the lowest right now um, is Saskatchewan. No, sorry, Newfoundland and Labrador, 4%. They were previously 4.2%, so they've actually gone down. But overall, I mean, we're up pretty substantially. Uh, it's scary, man. It definitely. Oh, the Callowit's 2.1. So if anyone needs to move,
Hmm.
Callowit's the place to go. Uh, yeah. Anyway, I mean, this is it's been interesting, and I think in the next few weeks we'll really see how this shakes out. And with the convoy and other protests that are planned, the interesting thing is to see on the weekend. You have a lot more people showing up for these protests. We'll see what happens this coming weekend, and then again how the police, law enforcement, and government plans on sort of dealing with this, and we'll circle back and see our thoughts on it, and yeah, how this plays out with real estate as well too, and interest rates and all of that jazz. But thanks, Horace. I appreciate you coming on with this, co-hosting, and it's nice to talk about things that are maybe not necessarily. It's more peripheral to what we
Yeah.
do, but I think it's still really relevant. Again, thanks guys for joining us today on our Tuesday Talks.
Take care, guys.
I'm Dan, and that's Harris. See ya.
Bye.